to be a boy is that I am strong. I can beat any kind of problems and all without any help and that all.
Man, by definition of a stereotype, serves two purposes.
A husband and a father.
Like strong or breadwinner or something of that sort,
He's a protector. He's a provider. These are identities introduced to him at a young age.
Masculine.
Maybe muscular.
Muscle, like a strong build.
Broader shoulders.
Dominant.
Egoistic, I guess. Short-tempered.
Mustache. Okay, hairy. I'm gonna go with that, yeah, because it's true.
Be a breadwinner. Be dominant. Boys as young as 6 buy into these stereotypes and internalize assumptions about gender roles.
200 years ago, the issue of women's empowerment was first addressed. It was only 40 years ago when we started thinking of men and their role in the movement. That really took a while. So what's the rationale behind engaging with young men and boys in gender work? And why did it take us so long to get here?
Gender inequality affects everyone, even men. Gender unequal societies are rife with dominance and power struggles, and that negatively affects the way boys and girls are raised. As we know, this inequality is experienced much more by women.
Women in all parts of the world continue to earn less than men for work of equal worth and value. They don't have equal access to land, property, and inheritance, and less access to credit and other financial resources. Women are also grossly underrepresented in politics and other areas where decision-making happens. The pandemic revealed this most recently. A research study found that women have been mostly absent from COVID-19 government task forces around the world.
But is this social structure bad only for women? The perpetuation of male dominance creates a world that is rife with inequality and power struggles, and this serves all of humanity badly.
And when we talk about the gender debate, we also have to talk about the fact, as we were saying earlier, that neither feminism nor misogyny is actually specific to one gender. We're all products of the same socialization process, the same, sometimes differing kinds of pressures. Men too are victims of patriarchy, or can be. Men too are victims of socialization and can be.
Put another way, the problem does not lie with men or women, but with hegemonic masculinity, a practice that legitimizes maleness as the dominant position in society and justifies the subordination of all others. Women and other genders are the natural victims of hegemonic masculinity, but there are some hints of its impact on men as well, who frequently find themselves in dangerous and harmful situations.
Where are the safe platforms for men like the SHGs, where they can share their questions about sexuality, about patriarchy, about masculinity, and the burden of being male?
So I have seen in West Bengal and in many states where the dropout among boys is also as high, in fact much higher than girls from the school, because they are pushed into the child labor for earning for the family. And they come to places like Delhi and big cities and the construction work. They are the young boys who can really, they're supple, they can move around onto the tall buildings and paint from outside, and they keep falling and dying. But there is literally no recognition of this, because boys and men are supposed to be dying for providing purposes, supposed to be fighting for somebody else's pride.
The idea of gender equity is so complex that to understand it, we have to first look at its root causes. And to do that, we have to use the right language to frame the issue. For example, when we talk about women's participation in the labor force or violence against women, we see it as a women's issue and not a social issue. Instead of picking at pieces of the problem, we have to see the problem as a whole. A violent, unequal society that allows the domination of one human by the other is bad for everyone.
In order to achieve gender equality, we have to transform gender norms shaped by patriarchy. In order to bring about this transformation, men and boys also need to have the opportunity to understand how patriarchy and gender socialization shape their own notions of who they should be and how they should behave. We also have to break the myth that feminism or gender equality is a zero-sum game. So the notion that more for women and girls is less for boys is problematic. And overall gender equality is good for everybody.
If we keep casting boys in a patriarchal mold, the cycle of power and dominance continues. And no one, women or men, are better off as a result. But before we look at how we can work with boys and men, let's take a closer look at their lives.
We have 230 million men just under the age of 18, and if you add between 18 and say 22, 24, that takes that number up significantly. I'm simply talking about the burden of being young, male, with hormones no doubt raging, no kind of stable relationships perhaps, and locked into predetermined notions of how to be a boy and then a man.
The International Men and Gender Equality Survey, I think one of the first and one of the most unique surveys that was done recently, showed how early childhood experiences and the boys who go through the experience of father beating mother or violent families or they witness violence around them determines their lifetime action against anyone that will interact, especially the women and girls, their girlfriends, their partners, their
The way the school system is designed, it is designed on a very control-based system where girls and boys are treated differently. Like girls would be asked to draw rangoli and painting, while boys will be asked to move benches and do very physical kind of work. While it's also assumed that girls can be given punishment in a different way. So there's a lot of anger that gets built up. Like when we open up the space and talk to boys, and they'll be like, why is it that we are beaten up and not girls? And why is it that we are always punished although we haven't done anything? So I think that leads to a lot of rigid notions of masculinity.
Like we said before, women, girls, and other genders are most often on the receiving end of violence from men. But what you've just heard is often from a young age, boys witness violence or even experience violence in various contexts. So how does that shape them? How do they process it? And how can we begin to unpack all this?
Over the last few years, spaces have been made to accommodate different identities of men. Increasingly, work with men and boys is focusing on intersectionalities.
The realization that intersectional programs with masculinities and with men will be the programs that are able to both hold accountable as well as acknowledge pressures that men are under. And so how do we sort of start acknowledging multiple identities that men have and that sort of define their experiences? In spaces where we are talking about masculinity as a sense of entitlement to power, and the crisis being that you have a sense of entitlement to power because you are male. But for many other reasons of caste, class, and other intersections of identity, you don't actually have the experience of power. You don't really wield that power, and that kind of continuous crisis of being told that you have power but actually not having it leads to violence, and to hold men accountable to that violence while acknowledging the pressures is something that we see as intersectionality in that programming.
Similarly, many other gender programs are starting to look at the nuances of engaging boys and men. There is growing consensus that boys and men need to see benefits for themselves from these programs over and above results for women. Put another way, beyond allyship, boys and men should be given the opportunity to benefit from gender programs. At the same time, including boys and men in gender work is not easy.
The biggest challenge that comes about when you're engaging in this space is resource mobilization, because in terms of allocation for women and girls, in any case, we've been struggling at every level.
We're looking at a future in which really radical changes have to be contemplated about, not for men and for women, about what the linkage is between your livelihood and your ability to have a job, just because there will be fewer and fewer jobs. But one of the things we don't want to see happen is to see men's insecurity be rerouted or rechanneled into proving their masculinity
Absolutely.
through violence on the women around them. or through other kinds of violence, through broader political violence, which
Political
is also,
violence, exactly
which is also
right.
very clearly happening.
How do we hold male politicians accountable to say, I want you as a man carrying in your space to believe that you're held accountable for the care economy, for supporting domestic workers, for looking at how we support households so that we have paid childcare, so that salaries for domestic workers and childcare workers are not the lowest on any, but they're as high as any other profession where we care about what happens.
In hindsight, gender programs should be encouraged to explore the idea of men not just as allies, but also as an integral part of all gender transformative interventions.
Everyone benefits from a gender-equal society. It makes our communities safer and healthier. All great changes are preceded by chaos, and the journey towards a community with gender equality is no different. And this is part of a larger struggle. A struggle for a society where people are not trapped in hierarchies of power, where violence and domination is replaced with understanding and partnership, where all burdens are shared and nothing is a woman's job or a man's job.
How about if we twist the language and we say, let's help women actualize their dreams and empower men to share and care? So could we start swapping language? Because it does fundamentally change the way we start thinking about our programs and our intentionality.
Our interest at RNP is also to think of this problem at a societal level. Is it time to consciously examine the lives of young males, to help them, to set them up to be their best selves? Not everyone sees the problem in the same way. But without giving young males this opportunity, are we fighting the battle for gender equity with only one hand? Perhaps civil society organizations that work with girls and women could be engaged with to share their learnings, to provide support, and even help co-create programs for men and boys. For this to happen, I hope philanthropy will come forward to actively support this journey. But the time seems to be right.